In 1988, 69-year-old Virginia Douglas walked into a store in Belfast, Maine, just to use the bathroom, but once she stepped inside, she was never seen again. So how does a woman disappear in a matter of minutes, without a trace, without a sound, and without a single witness? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I hope nobody's witnessing me in the bathroom. Today, we'll talk about the strange mystery of Virginia Douglas and the day that she vanished into nothing. Frank and Virginia Douglas built a quiet life in the town of Lexington, Massachusetts. It was the kind of place where the lawns were trimmed, the sidewalks stayed clean, and life moved at a calm, steady pace. Just 20 minutes outside the rush of Boston, Beantown, as people like to call it, because, I don't know, Bostonians are a little strange, Lexington felt like a safe place to grow old. They met young, working side by side at a local bank. It wasn't long before they fell in love. In their early 20s, they would then get married and start a family. Over the years, they raised 3 children under the same roof, 2 daughters, Marilyn and Virginia, who everyone called Ginny, and a son named Frank Jr. Frank worked at the bank for many years. In 1983, he retired, but retirement didn't slow him down. Instead, Frank found time for the things he loved. He became a strong tennis player, a sharp chess player, and even learned to ski. Each winter, he made sure to spend at least 1 week on the snowy slopes, feeling the cold wind rush past him. His days were full of activity, friends, and a fair amount of excitement. Virginia's life had taken a different path. Years earlier, she had left her job at the bank to raise their 3 children. When they were grown and gone, she didn't go back to the office. Instead, she poured her time into helping others, taking care of the elderly in her neighborhood. People remembered her for specifically this. She was gentle, quiet, always ready to lend a hand, even if no one had actually asked. But over time, the rhythm in their home would begin to change. Frank's world started to open up. New hobbies, new friends, new adventures. He was always out, busy with this or with that. Virginia, though, stayed behind. The house that once felt full was now quiet. Still, and sometimes it was just downright lonely. And then, unexpected things would begin to happen. It was on the evening of September 1st, 1988. Virginia was 69 years old. Frank was 71. After more than 46 years of routine and habit, they decided to do something just a bit different. They packed their bags for a surprise trip. No one knows why for sure. Maybe Virginia wanted to remind Frank that she was still up for an adventure. Maybe she was just tired of always being left behind. But either way, they picked Bar Harbor, Maine, a peaceful town known for its rocky shores and deep green woods of Acadia National Park. It was the kind of place where people went to hike, breathe fresh air, take in the quiet beauty of nature, hang out amongst the trees. Actually, fun fact, if you are physically, depressed and life kind of seems like it sucks in general, because, life can suck sometimes, go out in nature. The reality is like, everybody's always like, oh, well, if it's cured by that, then it's not really depression. But humans are meant to be in nature. That is what we are. And if you're living in a concrete jungle, so to speak, then you're really not living in nature. And it can screw you up. It's sort of like, how we have to use blue light in northern latitudes at nighttime. I think Sweden does that to combat depression, because you need blue light. It's the same thing with the sounds of nature and the greenery and pretty much everything else. You need to be out there at some point in time. So if you're feeling just kind of blasé about life and everything's great, dude, go out in nature for a little while. Anyways, so for Frank and Virginia, it was meant to basically be a change, a break from the routine, and a chance to reconnect. And around 8:30 a.m. that night, which is not a.m., that would actually be p.m., they stepped into their dark blue 1987 Oldsmobile Cutlass. The engine hummed as Frank turned the key. Then they pulled out of their driveway in Lexington and into the night. The road ahead was long. Bar Harbor was about 5 hours away, closer to 6 if you stopped for gas or coffee, and they were kind of getting a late start. They weren't in any kind of hurry, though. I will say, I drive across the country, and I don't know if you guys even like when I cut into these things, but me driving across the country, I go from Alabama to Seattle quite often because I love the Pacific Northwest, and you can basically bombardier, I guess it's called, your way down the highway. I pull 16-hour drives all the time, and I think I've actually done it in 2 days before, where I went from, Seattle to Alabama inside of 2 days. It sucked. So if you want an actual road trip to be nice, well then, take your time. Anyways, Frank and Virginia were taking it slow, just enjoying the ride. For them, this little trip was the adventure. So that first night, they pulled off the road and checked into the South Portland Motor Inn. It was a quiet and cozy place, just the kind of place where tired travelers would rest their heads. The next morning, after breakfast, they would hit the road again, but even then, they were still just kind of taking it easy. Again, if you want to enjoy a road trip, just mosey. Don't be like, well, we have to hit Cleveland, Ohio by 8 a.m. Like, do that. Imagine hitting Cleveland, Ohio at 8 a.m. So by the time Friday rolled around, September 2nd, it had already gotten kind of late into the day at around 5:30 p.m. when Frank pulled their dark blue Oldsmobile into the parking lot of Rennie's department store in Belfast, Maine. That was only about 2 hours north of the motel, so they hadn't made it very far. I'm not really sure how this guy was even driving so slow. What were you doing? So Virginia needed to use the bathroom, so Frank, being the helpful husband he always was, dropped her off at the front entrance and then parked the car. He stayed outside and waited. At first, there was nothing unusual, but as 10 minutes passed, and then 15, Frank began to feel that uneasy feeling kind of creep in. Maybe the bathroom line was long, he thought, or maybe she saw something in the store that had caught her eye. He tried to stay calm, telling himself everything was fine. Still, the worry continued to grow. So Frank made a fairly quick decision. He grabbed a pen and wrote a note. He left it on the steering wheel in case Virginia came back while he was inside. Then he headed into the store. He checked the restroom. Empty. He slowly walked the aisles, scanning every row. His eyes moved quickly from face to face, shelf to shelf, but Virginia was nowhere to be seen. Frank then walked back to the car, hoping maybe she had returned, but the seat was just as he had left it. Virginia's handbag was still in there. It held her money, her credit cards, and something even more important, her eye medication. She needed that 4 times a day, and there was no way that she would have just left it behind unless she was meant to come back. Now the thoughts in Frank's mind began to kind of turn a little dark. What if something had happened to her? What if someone had taken her? 10 more long minutes passed, and this time Frank went back into the store with a different look on his face. He wasn't just worried now, he was scared. He searched every aisle one by one. He looked behind displays, he peeked down corners, and even started asking strangers, "Have you seen my wife?" But no one had. He flagged down one of the store workers. They made an announcement over the loudspeaker, and everyone in the store could hear it echo through the aisles, but still, no Virginia. By 6:45 p.m., panic had completely taken over. Frank walked to a phone. His hand shook as he picked up the receiver and dialed for the police. The Belfast Police Department responded fast, and officers searched every inch of Rennie's and the area around it. Then, a possible clue emerged. One person said they thought they saw a woman who looked like Virginia walking west along Route 3. But just like that, she was gone, and no one knew where she had went. People had said they saw someone who looked like Virginia near the store, but when police looked closer, the times didn't line up. The details didn't match. The truth was, no one could be sure they saw her at all. Not even one person could say with certainty that they had seen Virginia walk inside Rennie's. Not a single witness. But something to know about this is the human mind, when it's not looking for something, is a terrible witness of anything. If you are focused on just getting your groceries and leaving the store, you are not going to notice anybody in particular, especially probably a 69-year-old woman. It's just not going to stand out in your memory, and your brain is not going to hold on to that information. It's impossible. If you held on to all the information you saw every single day, your brain would be so full of nonsense it wouldn't be able to process anything. So it was at this point that the first big problem in this strange case, besides the fact that a 69-year-old woman had suddenly disappeared without a trace, would begin to emerge. For 3 long days, search teams scoured the town. They walked through thick woods behind the store, climbed through the brush, checked every hidden spot. Basically, anywhere they thought that maybe she could be, they went and they looked, but they didn't find anything. Frank began to get desperate at this point and even hired his own search dogs. Their noses were trained to track missing people. They moved along the forest, sniffing everything that they could with their tails low and their eyes focused, but they would continue to find nothing. Still, Frank didn't give up. He left his dark blue Oldsmobile parked in the exact same spot outside of Rennie's. He kept someone there at all times just in case Virginia ever came back and saw the car, and just in case maybe she was trying to return. Police shared Virginia's photo everywhere, on posters and windows, local news, TV shows, anything that they could think of, and Frank would actually call hospitals and shelters just to see if maybe someone had seen her, even reaching out to old friends and family members, maybe thinking, oh, well, maybe she went and stayed with somebody, but no one had ever seen her. And then things would continue to just devolve from here. Reportedly, a psychic contacted Frank's neighbor and claimed that Virginia was still inside the store. Okay, first things first, Probably don't trust psychics, is all I'm saying. They're kind of grifters. But Frank knew it was a long shot. But when you've lost someone, you will try anything possible. So on Labor Day, a day when Rennie's was supposed to be closed, Frank asked the store manager to open it up. And the manager said yes. Frank, the manager, and 2 employees spent hours going through the building. They moved heavy boxes, they checked behind locked doors, they even opened every closet and every storage room. And as they climbed to the roof, they also searched everywhere there. But there was no Virginia. Nothing. It was as if she had just simply disappeared into thin air. But behind the scenes, something else was quietly happening. There was more to this story and more than Frank had been sharing. And now, with no solid clues and no sign of Virginia, police had to go back, pretty much back to the beginning. They would begin retracing every single step the couple had taken from the moment that they left their quiet home in Lexington on that Thursday night. So the first stop was the South Portland Motor Inn. Frank had said that they spent the night there before continuing their drive. He told officers they had checked in late and then had breakfast downstairs the next morning. But soon, another puzzle piece didn't fit. Just like at the department store, no one remembered seeing Virginia. The motel staff confirmed one thing. Yes, Frank had checked in sometime after 11 p.m. on September 1st, but not a single person, not the front desk clerk, not the breakfast servers, not anyone remembered ever seeing Virginia with him. Not when he arrived, not when he left the next morning. And that made police stop and think, because this was becoming a pattern. Frank kept saying that Virginia had been with him, but no one else could ever prove it. Then came a new question. Why take a sudden trip in the first place? Bit strange, isn't it? Frank said it all started with a little argument. Okay, so the night before they left, he had been outside watering the lawn. They went inside to use the bathroom, and without thinking, the screen door closed behind him and locked. A moment later, Virginia was at the door. She looked upset. Frank said he told her it was an accident. He didn't mean to lock her out. Looking a little sus there, Frank. But Virginia didn't seem to believe him. She thought he had done it on purpose. Frank told police that this wasn't unusual. He said Virginia often had mood swings that she could go from smiling to upset in just a moment. He said she sometimes got sad or angry without even a warning, but he claimed they made up pretty quickly. And that's when he had an idea. Let's go to Maine. A surprise trip. A peace offering. Okay, I mean, don't get me wrong, I went to Maine for my honeymoon, and it's a beautiful place, but a bit strange after an argument just to decide to do that. Why not just take her to dinner, or, I don't know, go see a movie? Anyways, something nice to do together, obviously, after a rough night. Frank told police that it wasn't the first time Virginia had disappeared. She had disappeared, actually, once before. He said that 25 years ago, after a family argument, Virginia once packed up and left for a few days. She had gone to New York and then came back home, but this time Frank said it felt different. Virginia had left behind her purse, her credit cards, and something very important, which was going to be her eye drops that she needed for her eyes. She needed these at least 4 times a day, and Frank believed she never would have left without them in the first place. So as the police looked deeper into the couple's life, they started asking some questions. Who were Frank and Virginia Douglas? What kind of marriage did they really have? Was Frank a kind of a douche and maybe did lock her out? I don't know. Listen, allegedly, okay? I don't want to get sued by Frank, and I don't think I'm going to, but it's just my personal opinion if you lock your spouse out. How does the door accidentally lock? So some people would give very simple answers when the cops asked them. Neighbors said their relationship seemed normal, sometimes sweet, sometimes full of small arguments. You get older with somebody, try not arguing with them, it's impossible. But nothing strange for 2 people who have been married for nearly 50 years. But their daughter, Marilyn, would tell a very different story. She said her father didn't truly respect Virginia. He didn't see her for who she really was, a smart, kind, and strong woman, and that made things feel darker than just an ordinary marriage. Friends of the couple also began noticing changes too. After Frank retired, he became more outgoing. He played tennis and stayed active, but Virginia was the opposite. She stayed home more often and seemed quite lonely. Some friends remembered her saying that Frank didn't spend time with her anymore. She would cook his dinner, watch him leave, and then sit in the house alone. And when she talked about it, she seemed truly sad. Even though some people were starting to wonder if Frank was hiding something, police didn't have any solid proof. There was no real evidence to show what had happened to Virginia Douglas. So the search would continue. State police carefully looked through the Douglas' car, and they searched every part, even the trunk, and inside they found some odd things. A small piece of carpet from the trunk's lining and some bits of mud and grass. But there was one important thing they didn't find: no blood. Nothing that clearly pointed to any crime. Still, the police would continue digging. They went to Rennie's, the department store, where Frank said he and Virginia had gone shopping the day she had vanished. But did they go shopping? He sat out in the car. And that's where things continued to kind of become strange. A store worker told them something that Frank had actually never mentioned. Surprise, surprise. The clerk remembered that not long after Frank reported Virginia missing, he came back to the store. He was shopping for women's lingerie. He even asked the clerk what size she wore, saying she looked about the same size as his wife. That way, he said, he could buy the right fit for Virginia, and if you don't know, that's actually quite a classic move of making a pass at the clerk. But what really caught the police's attention was that Frank came back less than an hour later to buy even more lingerie. And this was all while he was supposedly looking for his missing wife. Later, when police looked inside Virginia's suitcase, the one that was supposed to be packed for their weekend trip, they would notice something that kind of stand out to them. All the new lingerie Frank bought was inside that suitcase, but there was no other underwear, none of Virginia's usual clothes. Maybe, I don't know what kind of weekend they were supposed to have, but look, okay, anyways, so it made police wonder, did Virginia really forget to pack her own underwear, or did Frank pack the suitcase himself and then, realizing the police would check it out, go out and buy lingerie to make it look like she had packed it? When police asked Frank why he had brought the lingerie, he gave an unusual answer. He said it was meant as a good omen, in his words. He hoped that by buying Virginia a gift, maybe she would come back to him. That makes literally zero sense, but the police found it also making not a lot of sense that Frank didn't tell them about these purchases. They only learned about them after talking to the store employees, and this made them wonder, was Frank hiding something? You, probably a lot like me at this point, are beginning to think Frank may be hiding something. Meanwhile, their daughter Jenny had spent several days in Belfast helping search for her mom, and after that, she went back to the family's home in Lexington, Massachusetts, and she shared that house with her parents. But as soon as she walked in, something would feel off. Jenny knew her mother well. Virginia was always careful about the house. She liked things neat, safe, and in a specific order, as many people do usually. But before leaving on a trip, she would close the windows, pull down the shades, and lock the doors. She always made sure food wouldn't be left to spoil in the fridge. That was just the kind of person that she was. She was organized and didn't like to waste things. But now the windows were wide open, the shades were still up, and the refrigerator was packed with fresh food, almost like somebody left in a hurry. It didn't look like someone really had gone on a planned weekend trip. It looked like, as I just said, someone left in a hurry. And even more puzzling, Virginia and Frank had left the house late at night. Jenny had been working and was due to actually come home just an hour later. Her mom would usually wait to kind of say goodbye, but this time she evidently didn't want to. Virginia didn't feel like her mother had planned to go anywhere at all. It just didn't add up. One of Virginia's close friends agreed with Jenny. She said Virginia always made sure to be home when Jenny got back from work. She knew her daughter's schedule down to the minute, and that's just kind of, typically if people keep their house clean and have specific things that they want ordered, they kind of keep a schedule as well. And this is just kind of the mother that Jenny or Virginia was. So at first, Jenny didn't think too much about it, with the open windows, the uncovered shades, the food rotting in the fridge. But the following week, after coming home from work, she noticed there was something that kind of left her freaked out, and then she would call the police right away. What she found would soon become a key part of this investigation. Later, police confirmed it. There were bloodstains on the carpet. The blood matched Virginia's blood type. Not only that, clumps of her hair were found near the back door. Some of it was on the ground, some of it was stuck deep in the creases of the door frame. It looked like someone had been dragged. So what really happened that night? Was there an argument near the screen door, or did something much worse take place? Could Frank have lost his temper? Maybe he was feeling trapped. Virginia wasn't as active anymore. He may have felt that she was holding him back. Did they argue about that, and did it get out of hand? There are many theories, but at this point, it was all just guesswork. In the end, Virginia did live in that house, so her blood and even her hair being there, on its own, it's not proof of a crime, but the way it was found, the patterns, the location, it just didn't sit right with people who loved her. And I'm just going to point this out, right? I've lived in many places in my life, and I don't really know if clumps of my hair and blood have been ever in door frames, or it's typically something that you clean up. It's something that you would know is in that spot. If you have a nosebleed, that's one thing, right? You're gonna be like, I need it. Let me make a mental note. I need to come back and clean this. If it's enough blood that they found it, yeah, I don't know, man. So the mystery would start actually dividing the family. Virginia's daughters, Marilyn and Jenny, thought something strange had definitely happened, but Frank Jr., their brother, stood by his father. He didn't believe Frank had done anything wrong, despite clumps of hair and blood in the house. The daughters were also hurt by something else. Their dad hadn't even told them that their mother was missing. They didn't hear it from him, they found it out from the police. Before Virginia disappeared, Marilyn hadn't spoken to her father in years. No one really knows why. They had actually never shared a reason as to why this happened, but after what had happened with the mother, things would only continue to get worse, and this was the final straw. When Jenny found the blood and hair, it shook her quite deeply. She moved out of the house right away and cut off all contact with her father. A few months later, she came back just to grab skis, but when she got there, she couldn't even open the door. The locks had been changed. To Jenny, this made things feel even more suspicious. Even with searches and police efforts, the case wasn't going anywhere. There were strange details, yes, but no solid proof, and without a body, it was hard to say for sure what had happened to Virginia. Then, 6 weeks after Virginia vanished, Frank would disappear too. He left their home in Massachusetts, and he stopped talking to the press. It seemed like he gave up on looking for his wife. Just 3 months after Virginia went missing, her daughters made a painful decision. They held a memorial service for their mother in Florida. It was their way of beginning to heal, even if they didn't have all the answers. Frank didn't go. Neither did Frank Jr. The daughters believed that their mother had been murdered, and they said something else, too, that they believed they knew who did it. Because of legal rules, they couldn't say the person's name in public, but they did share everything they knew with the police. Meanwhile, Frank went back to his usual routines. He played tennis, he worked in the yard, he even chatted with neighbors walking by. One neighbor remembered something that was kind of odd. Frank often brought up Virginia in conversation. It was almost like he wanted to talk about her, like he was hoping someone would listen. A whole year would then pass. Then Frank did something that was fairly unexpected. He hired a criminal defense lawyer. He said it was just in case the police ever named him as a suspect. Not long after that, in September of 1989, just over a year since Virginia had passed, police would then get new information, and it led them to Sebago Lake. That's about 2.5 hours from Belfast, and about an hour and a half from Portland. They sent in search dogs, state officers, and even the FBI would eventually get involved. But the exact reason for the search near Sebago Lake, that was never shared with the public. Sebago Lake is pretty big. It's the second largest lake in all of Maine, and it stretches across several towns. One of those towns, Casco, was important because Frank's brother had lived there. Earlier on, Frank's children had called their uncle, and he was the only other family member they knew in Maine. They hoped that maybe he would know something, really anything, about their mom. But he didn't tell them anything useful. The search around the lake lasted for a while, but in the end, nothing was ever found. No clues, no signs, and obviously no trace of Virginia. There's really nothing to prove that she had ever been there. So officially, the case stayed open, and it was still called a missing person case, not a murder investigation, because there just wasn't enough proof. And then 3 years after Virginia vanished in 1991, police finally named Frank Douglas as a suspect. I think he was probably a suspect well before that. And that's when Virginia's daughters, Marilyn and Jenny, decided to speak out. They no longer really had to hold back. They told the world what they believe had happened. They said their mother's death wasn't planned, it was a terrible accident. They believed that something had gone wrong, and when Frank realized what he had done, he panicked, he got rid of Virginia's body, then he made up a strange story to cover it all up. A story no one, family, friends, or strangers, ever truly believed. Marilyn and Jenny never gave up hope for justice, but the years kept passing. No one was ever arrested, and no major breakthroughs ever came. One detective, years later, said that this was one of the strangest cases he had ever worked on. The investigation would continue, but the mystery of what really happened to Virginia Douglas stayed just that, a complete mystery. Frank Douglas eventually passed away. The exact date isn't clear, but when he died, he may have taken the truth with him. People say he lived alone in the same house for years after Virginia disappeared, and during that time, rumors would continue to follow him everywhere. In the end, the story of Virginia Douglas leaves behind more doubts than certainties. Some people believe she truly walked into Rennie's department store that morning, perhaps just looking for a restroom, only to disappear without a trace. Others are convinced that she never was there at all. They believe that the breakfast, the motel, and even the entire Labor Day weekend ordeal may have been nothing more than part of a carefully constructed cover. If that's true, then Virginia's fate was likely sealed long before that trip ever began. Whatever really happened that weekend remains buried beneath silence and the weight of unanswered suspicion. And that's how the case of Virginia Douglas was unsettling. Not just a disappearance, but a chilling puzzle that still, to this day, has no ending. So, as always, I like to break in here and talk about these things. So, a couple of things about, I guess, how these kind of go down is the best way I can put it. What you need to understand is, and a lot of people, I guess this is kind of where this ideology comes from, right? You have to have a body for a conviction. That's not really true. Okay, how the court system works, it's not so much just evidence, it's what you can convince people of, right? That's what it's all based on. So like when you go to jail, or not when jail, when you go to court, it's like the state versus you. So the state is trying to convince a jury of your peers that you are guilty of this. And that is how the whole thing works. They don't have to wheel in a body to make this happen. This kind of seems like there is more than enough substantial, I guess, not substantial, but circumstantial evidence that could actually convict this guy of the murder. The clumps of hair is a bit weird. The blood, I mean, all of that stuff, I think nowadays would definitely be a little more heavily relied upon instead of just finding the body. Because, people get creative. If you leave in the middle of the night with your wife, who allegedly is going on a trip with you, you could go into the middle of nowhere and bury somebody 6 feet down in the wood. I'm not saying do this, but like that, you could do that. And dogs can sniff out things like that, but if they didn't even know that you were in that area, how would anybody know where to look in the first place? So that's kind of the biggest issue. I think most murders, like while they do have the person who commits the murder or stuff like that, if there's like a drifter that comes through town and ends up taking somebody out and then just drifting through and nobody saw that person, those go unsolved all the time because of stuff like this. So no, you don't need a body to convict. So it's a little strange that the cops never got involved to that, I guess, capacity. The other thing is, this was the 80s. I don't believe security cameras were as prevalent in the 80s as they are now. Well, late 80s anyways, and into the 90s. Like now, I don't know, you guys watch YouTube and you see security footage all the time. It still looks like it was filmed on a potato for some reason, but that just, I guess, is what it is. Now, the question is, did he actually do it? Well, he's gone now, so I guess I'm not going to get sued, but to me, if nobody remembers seeing her, and again, the human brain is, especially from complete strangers, is not exactly the best witness in the world, so it's not like a 100% fact that nobody ever saw her there, then yeah, I guess possibly nobody remembers seeing her. But for her to just go into a bathroom and disappear, the devil's advocate here would kind of indicate to me that maybe, her own troubles in the relationship could just be something that you need to look at as well. Was she like, screw this dude, I'm tired of him, I am out of here, and she just walked off? In his absence, could she have had somebody else? Because I'm pretty sure in his absence, he had somebody else too. It just seems to me like this is a situation where if she is still alive, she definitely would have come back and talked to her daughters. So could it be that something like this came out and then Frank lost his cool in that specific instance and then he ended up taking her out? That seems very likely to me, because when you have a situation, especially people growing older, if one is doing way too much and the other is just left behind, then what's to stop the one that's doing way too much from finding somebody, and what's to stop the one who's left behind from finding somebody else as well? Distance creates this problem between people. This is why long distance relationships are very, very difficult for people, because how are they, when you don't have the person, it typically doesn't work. So could she have also known that maybe he was cheating, and as a result of that, she threatened to divorce him, and then boom, this whole situation kind of went down? There's just a lot here that points to Frank kind of being the actual criminal in this situation, and I'm not really sure why the justice system wouldn't at least make an attempt to kind of go after him. They named him as a suspect and then nothing else was ever done. It just seems like to me, again, allegedly, if all of this came down as such, without really knowing the rest of the situation, it seems like Frank kind of did something. Nobody just goes and disappears, right? And that's actually not true. One guy did try to crawl behind a refrigerator at a convenience store where he got stuck, and then they found him 10 years later as a skeleton. I'm not really certain how somebody can decompose inside of a convenience store and nobody be like, hey, maybe we need to move this fridge. But yeah, so people can go missing in that type of sense, but then you have to ask yourself, why would Virginia crawl behind a freezer to look for anything? Did she simply, and that, again, it's all predicated, she has daughters, she has a son. She would go back for them, right? If she wanted to leave Frank and didn't feel safe in that situation, she could have gone back later on. And basically, I believe that Virginia is gone. That's the only reason she didn't go back for her kids. It wasn't some sort of oh, I'm in love now and I'm going to leave everybody behind. That would not make any sense for it to go on as long as it has. I think, personally, Frank murdered her prior. That's just how I feel. And I'm not saying that's what happened, just in case. I don't even really know the legality of all that, but that's what it seems like to me. So Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you think that Frank did take her out, you're probably in good company. If you think Virginia's still alive, then how do you explain the fact that she never came back to talk to her kids or do anything, even after Frank died? I mean, if she was still alive, why not come back? That to me just doesn't seem like the logical outcome. But then again, human nature is not exactly completely logical. Well, if you enjoyed learning about this, please leave a like as it helps get the video out there, and subscribing is a great way to stay up to date on when I post. I will drop my links down in the description for stuff like Patreon, but speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West, Invictus Echo, Monkey Man, and Scrungle. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. And at the Secondhand Accounts tier, we have Bianca, Fred Rush, Stutz, and Troy. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support. It goes a long way towards helping out, so thank you. But alright, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.